Okay, so this presentation is just going to be supplemental. It's meant to accompany your reading from the textbook this week, but also to be a refresher from English 111. And we're going to talk specifically about how we use sources in our research and why we do that. So, as a writer, you have a purpose, and your purpose is to submit a claim and then argue that claim using source material and then to convince ultimately your audience of the validity of that claim that you're making. So just like an attorney gathers evidence to support his or her case, a writer uses sources to convince the audience of the validity of their claim. So as a writer, you're going to use evidence to persuade your audience to accept your claim. So you're going to set apart a claim, and then you're going to use source material to prove why your claim is valid. And the type of evidence that you're going to use is going to vary. It just really depends on which discipline you're working on. So for example, an example I give you here is if you're working in the science related field of biology or chemistry and you're composing a lab report, then chances are you're going to look to previously conducted scientific experiments and you're going to pull data from those. Whereas if you're working in the humanities or English courses, English related humanities disciplines, and you're writing maybe a literature review or literary analysis, then you're going to pull from current scholarly resources. These may come from quotations from a piece of literature, they may be literary theories from textbooks, but they're going to come from scholarly resources in that discipline. So the process of putting together an argument is called an analysis. Analysis, of course, is creating a claim or a thesis, and then using source material as a way to compose an argument. And it's your job as the writer-researcher in this course to gather current research and interpret that research in order to make, support, test, or refine that claim that you're making. And to do that successfully, you do need to have the most up-to-date current research available. So we're very fortunate to live in a world that's constantly researching, constantly investigating, constantly questioning, and things are constantly changing, which means that there's always something going on. It's always interesting. But what that means for you as a researcher and writer is that it's important to look for the most current research so that you are including valid source material. So something that was published in 1998 is more than likely not going to be as valid as something published in 2014 because obviously there have been 16 years between that first piece of writing and the current piece of writing. A lot can happen in 16 years. So you're going to want to make sure that you have the most current research available, and that's just to strengthen your overall argument. So the thesis, and we'll get into thesis statements and how the thesis works in future weeks in our course. But the thesis is really the chief important claim in your argument. It is the focal point, the controlling idea. It should always be original, meaning that no one else is making this claim, and if they have made this claim, you are going at it from a very different angle. It needs to be assertive, it needs to be very strongly worded, well written, and most importantly, it needs to be debatable. So it needs to be something that you can argue, something that you can use your source materials to convince an audience of. So something as simple as the sky is blue, while it is accurate, it's not a debatable idea, therefore it cannot be a thesis. It's not a very interesting claim. It's not necessarily a claim, it's just a fact. And that's the difference, fact versus claim. And for our course, you're going to be creating, composing, and proposing these claims and using source material and the art of argument to make that claim valid. So a strong thesis, of course, requires strong evidence. You need strong evidence to support it because without that evidence, a thesis is just an unsubstantiated, fun word, idea. So basically, without evidence, your thesis is moot. So you're going to want to make sure that you're pulling as much evidence as you possibly can, interpreting that evidence, and using it to form a well-written, well-argued paper. So how do you incorporate evidence? When should you incorporate evidence into your argument? And the answer to that is that once you've formulated your claim and your thesis, at that point, then you go looking for evidence to strengthen that thesis and that claim. And you work evidence into your argument in three ways. You offer evidence that agrees with your stance. So you're going to first look for people who are proposing similar claims who have proven their claim, and you're going to look for the source materials that they've used and other sources that have that would suggest an agreement with the claim that you're making. And then you're going to add that to your own ideas. And then you're going to present evidence that contradicts your stance. This is something that people don't often do. People tend to ignore the other side. But it's really important as a writer to include evidence that pushes against your claim so that you can then argue against or refute that evidence in order to strengthen your position. So it's this idea that you can incorporate the other side of the argument and use that to fuel your argument and to continue to prove to your audience that your claim is valid. And then lastly, you can use quotations to support your assertion, but never to just merely state or restate your claim. So you're not looking for quotations that say specifically what your thesis or claim is saying. You're looking for quotations to support your assertion, things that continue to add to the claim that you're making. So there's going to be a lot of interpretation going on your part, but that's part of what research and that's part of what writing are all about. Effective use of sources. To use evidence effectively, you're going to need to integrate it smoothly into your essay. And then this is key. And to do this, you want to follow this pattern. You're going to want to state your claim. So when you use a source, you're going to want to reiterate your claim. You're going to want to then use the source to give evidence, remembering to always relate it back to the claim. So continue to link your ideas, never just drop something in. Make sure that there are different pieces in there to transition between ideas, but also to connect your evidence to the claim. And then lastly, you're going to want to comment on the evidence to show how it supports the claim. So you're not going to want to just drop a citation into a text. In order to effectively use sources, you're going to state your claim, introduce the evidence, connect it back to the claim, and then have a final comment or final remark on the evidence to show, once again, how it supports your claim. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. Your textbook will give you more information on using sources. And of course, I am hoping and working under the assumption that you have tackled some of this in English 111. But as we get going, if you have questions or concerns as we move into this first major written assignment, which is your question assignment, I want you to be familiar with the proper ways to gather source material and the proper ways to use them. So as we get going, please let me know if you have any questions, and I will answer them as they come at me. Otherwise, have a good rest of the week.